Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Counseling and Career Services Resume and Cover Letter Writing Online Workshop. This is part 2 of a 5-part series where we will be focusing on setting up your document. The rest of our series includes what makes a resume effective, ideas for your content and sections, some writing tips, and cover letters. We do encourage you to take a look at all 5 parts of the resume series so that you get a strong, well-rounded idea of how to write an effective resume and cover letter. Throughout this workshop, I will be referring to a few different exercises that you can do to help you build your resume as you go. There are links to online resources for these exercises listed below. If you're watching this workshop through our YouTube channel, you'll find the links in the description of the YouTube video. If you're watching this video through our blog, you'll find links directly below this video. You can also find all of these exercises through our online resume guide, which is available on our website, ulethbridge.ca/CES. If you would like hard copies of these exercises, stop by Counseling and Career Services in Anderson Hall, AH 153 on the Lethbridge campus. If you're on one of our northern campuses, you can find hard copies in the main office. One of the first things we'll discuss in this workshop are some layout and design ideas to help you get your pages set up. One of the first questions we always get is, how long should my resume actually be? And typically, standard Canadian etiquette states that a resume should be 2 pages, so we usually want to look for 2 pages. Now, we also recommend that you include references in your document, and it's okay for those to go onto a 3rd page if they don't fit in pages 1 and 2. People also often wonder if they should be using a resume builder or template. And although that might seem like the easier option, we actually typically recommend avoiding templates because they can often be very frustrating to use. If you viewed part 1 of our video series, you'll know that we really want to make sure that your resume is very targeted and tailored, and that means that you're going to have to do a lot of customization. If you're using a standardized resume builder or template, you may find that the template doesn't allow you to do what you want to do or emphasize the things that you want to emphasize. Perhaps you can't delete a section that you don't need, or you can't move a section up to the beginning of your document, even though that's where it would work best. So usually we actually recommend just opening a blank Word document and building what you need. Now this can be a little bit more work than using a template because we want to make sure that any formatting choices you make are consistent. So for instance, if you decide that all of your headings are going to be bold and all capitals, then you need to actually manually go in and make sure that all of your headings are bold and all capitalized. A template would do that for you, but again, you may ultimately find in the long run that it's more of a frustrating process than simply building it yourself. So we do actually recommend avoiding templates if you can. We also recommend using bullet points to add descriptive detail to your resume. The reason we recommend bullet points is simply because they make things easier to read. If you've watched part 1 of our video series, you'll remember that most employers only spend about 6 seconds initially going through a resume. That means they're skimming the information. Bullet points allow you to easily put information in that's quick and easy to read that will hopefully grab the reader's attention and make them want to read more. Whereas if you have a big heavy paragraph, the employer might not actually take the time to read it. You can find more ideas to help you set up your resume in the Style Guidelines document, which is included in those links that I mentioned earlier. If you're going through our online resume writing guide, it's listed as Appendix A and titled Style Guidelines. It covers things like margins, punctuation, font size, etc. Once you've got your page set up, you'll want to think about what type of format to use. And the 2 main formats that most people use are the chronological or the combination. A chronological format is especially useful for people who have a lot of work experience that is directly related to their new job target. It focuses really heavily on relevant work experience and lists them in order from most recent to least recent. So if you have a lot of work experience that's directly related to the position you're applying for, a chronological format might be a good choice for you. But what happens if you have little relevant experience? For new graduates and for students, that's often the case because you're just starting out in your careers. Therefore, the combination style format might work better for you. What a combination format does is it allows you to pull on lots of different aspects of your background rather than only focusing on work experience. So it might include things like a skills section, volunteer work, and other qualities that you bring to the role. It's a combination of lots of different things in your life, not just your work experience. If you're not sure which format works best for you, we have an exercise that you can spend a little bit of time on. I encourage you to pause the video now and look through the format checklist. It's going to ask you some different questions, and based on your answers, it'll recommend either the chronological or the combination format. You can find this exercise in the links listed below, and if you're following along through our online resume guide, it's listed in Appendix B. I also encourage you to take a look at some of the sample resumes that we've included so that you can see the difference between the combination and the chronological format. Now that you've had a chance to take a look at some different formats and choose the appropriate one for yourself, we want to shift gears a little bit and think about applicant tracking systems. So you may have heard about the robots reading your resume and not really been sure what that meant. Well, some large and medium-sized employers have decided that they're spending far too much human time actually reading through resumes because they get lots and lots and lots of applications, and not all of them are actually relevant. So what they've done is they've implemented ATS, or applicant tracking systems, that will help them to weed through documents and find the relevant ones. So what they do is when they have a job posting, they go through that posting and they choose keywords and phrases that are relevant to the particular position. They input those keywords into a scanning software, which scans through all the resumes that they receive and looks for hits on those keywords. If your resume gets enough hits on those keywords, it gets passed along to a human to read. But if your document doesn't have any of the keywords or phrases, the scanning software is going to say, this application isn't relevant, and we're not going to bother passing it along to a human to read. That means that you could get screened out of a hiring process without a human being ever even reading the resume that you took so much time to prepare. So this is one of the really important reasons that we make sure that we target our documents. It will help you get past the ATS and let the hiring managers actually see and read your documents. You may have also heard or thought about more creative formats for your resume. This might include things like a video resume, a presentation done in a software like PowerPoint or Prezi, or something like a movie poster or marketing materials that include your information. There are lots of interesting and unique ideas you could go with, but before you choose a creative format, ask yourself a few questions. First of all, how will this be received in your field? In more creative fields, it will usually go over very well. In more conservative fields, it might simply confuse the employers. The other thing you have to make sure that you do is include relevant information. So sometimes we get so creative that we actually miss out on including our important relevant details. So whatever you choose to do in terms of creativity, make sure that you're considering what's appropriate for your field and make sure that you're still highlighting your most important relevant information through whatever it is that you choose to submit. You also have to think about how you're submitting your document. If you have to use an online system, there may be some restrictions in terms of what you can send. So check into all of those things before you go ahead and spend a lot of time creating something unique and different and then finding out that you're not able to send it in. Another thing you may have encountered is the question of whether you should be using a resume or a CV or curriculum vitae. Now, this can often be quite a confusing question because these terms are used differently in different parts of the world. In some places, a resume and a CV are considered essentially the same thing. However, in most parts of Canada, we actually look at a resume and a CV differently. As we mentioned in part 1 of our resume workshop series, a resume is considered to be a targeted summary of your background and strengths that tells the reader how you can be effective in one particular role. It's short form, it's a summary, it's targeted. We're looking at about 2 pages. These are the things we want to keep in mind for a resume. A CV is in some ways the opposite of a resume. Rather than being a short-form, summary, targeted document, a CV is meant to be comprehensive, and it typically has more of an academic focus. So we're looking at a comprehensive history of your academic credentials And the purpose of this document is typically used for academic positions, so things like teaching and research, or if you're applying to a professional program like law school or a graduate program like a master's or PhD program. Often a CV can be quite long. It might be 15, 20, 30 pages long as someone develops it over the course of an academic career. If you'd like to see a CV, talk to your professors and see if they'll share theirs with you. They will include things like all of the different courses they've taught, their research history, and their publication history. If you're not quite sure whether you should be using a resume or a CV, contact our office and we can give you a hand. You will likely only need to use a CV if you're applying for a graduate program that specifically states they would like you to use a CV in your application, or if you're applying for an academic role like a sessional instructor. Since most of you will likely be focusing more on a resume, that's what we'll spend the rest of this workshop discussing. So if we're thinking of developing a short-form, targeted, summary resume, it might feel a little bit overwhelming trying to figure out where to begin. In order to help deal with that feeling of being overwhelmed, we actually recommend taking a step back and starting with what we call a master inventory. This is going to be a place where you write down anything and everything that you can possibly think of about your background, skills, experiences, personal qualities, and anything else that you might have to offer to an employer in any kind of role. It's going to be a place where you can put all of that comprehensive information so that you don't forget it or lose it. Think of your master inventory like a tool that you would use to keep yourself organized. It's not something that you'll ever submit to an employer. It's not the same as your resume. It's just your place where you can get everything down in one spot and then start to sort through it. Once you've got all of your information down on paper, then you need to start thinking about each particular job you're going to apply for and what pieces you're going to pull from your master inventory and put onto your targeted 2-page resume. The job posting is what's going to guide you as you determine which pieces to include or not include. You'll want to go through that job posting in fine detail, thinking about keywords and phrases, understanding the needs of the role, and getting a really good idea of what the employer is looking for. In order to make it easier for you to do this, we've put together an exercise called Use the Job Posting as a Guide. It's available in the links listed below, and if you're following along through our online resume guide, it's Appendix C. I recommend taking a moment now to pause the video and pull up that exercise alongside a job posting for a position that interests you. Spend a few moments identifying how you meet the needs of the role, where you may have some gaps, and creating a plan for how you will address those gaps. This concludes the Setting Up Your Document section of our online resume workshop. We recommend that you continue on and watch parts 3, 4, and 5 of our video series, which will cover the content and sections that you want to include in your resume, some ideas for writing effectively, and also how to write an effective cover letter. Feel free to reach out to us anytime if you have questions or would like help as you go through your documents. You're welcome to contact us at ces.students@uleth.ca or give us a call at 403-317-2845.